Talk Show. Recorded live.
Welcome, everybody, to another edition of Myth or Logic Radio. My name is Tom Murasso from BornToManifest.com. Today, my guest is Sheri Winston, and Sheri is one of the country's most respected teachers about sex and sexuality. Her specialized knowledge is derived in large measure from her two-decade career as a certified nurse midwife and gynecological practitioner. She has been a sex teacher for a decade and is the founder and executive director of the Center for the Intimate Arts. She teaches at educational institutions, women's conferences, sexuality boutiques, and other venues. Sheri, how are you doing today?
I am having a fine day. How are you doing?
I am having a fine day as well, and thanks so much for joining us.
It is my pleasure.
I saw your book, and it's really lots of fun.
Good.
Not only fun, it's very informative, and the book actually is called Women's Anatomy of Arousal, Secret Maps to Buried Pleasure. Mm-hmm. And it's the 2010, what is it, ASEC Book of the Year?
Yeah,
ASEC Book of the Year.
American Association of Sex Educators, Counselors, and Therapists.
All right. Well,
yeah.
it's a great book, and in today's society, we seem to be obsessed with sex. It's everywhere, in the movies and on TV, the internet, magazines, advertisements. What has changed from our parents' and grandparents' generation, in your opinion? Are we better at having wonderful, loving sex, or worse than those generations?
That is a great question. You're certainly right in that we're surrounded by it, and it's hard to escape, and yet there's still an awful lot of people who are not having joyful, satisfying sexual relationships. So I think we're probably better off than we were. There's definitely more information, and people can connect with like-minded communities, but we still have a long way to go before people really have correct information and really know how to apply it so that they can have the kind of sex that we all dream of having.
So that's pretty much it. The amount of information that is available to us now, as opposed to our parents' generations, and also the belief systems that went along with that, huh?
Yeah, but it's funny because in some ways we've come so far, and in other ways we have so far to go.
Sure.
I mean, like in my parents' generation, nobody had sex before you got married. Nobody lived together before you got married, and now for most people that's pretty normal and pretty acceptable. So that's stuff like that has certainly changed. But we still have an awful lot of pregnant teenagers and epidemics of diseases and people just walking around feeling broken and like there's something wrong with them because of either it doesn't work the way they think it's supposed to work, or it's not like it is in the movies, or those sorts of things. So we still have things we need to work on, that's for sure.
Right. So, in your opinion, what would be the biggest indicator in our society that influences our sexuality?
Well, the media and the internet are so powerful. I would say that that's certainly pervasive, and we also can't really ignore things like porn. I mean, the porn industry probably makes almost as much money as the pharmaceutical companies. I mean, they make huge amounts of money, so people are definitely getting a lot of entertainment and erotic charge from it. Unfortunately, they're not getting a lot of education from any of those places.
So we're getting back to information and education. How can parents help their children grow and develop into mature adults who have a healthy view of sexuality?
Oh, I love that question. And I have to tell you that in the list of the next books I want to write, one of them is about having a whole book that's really dedicated to helping parents raise sexually healthy children. So I have a lot I could say about it, but also the simplest thing I would say is that it starts when they're babies, and it is really from then on, we're teaching them things all the time. We're teaching them about their genitals and if that's a good thing or a bad thing. We teach them when we teach them the names of body parts, or we skip over the names of the body parts that we don't want to talk about. We teach them by our own attitudes and comfort with our body, with touch and non-sexual touch I'm talking about now. And so the thing to be aware of is that we're teaching them all the time, and that we get these opportunities to give them information all along the way. We shouldn't be waiting to have a talk with them when they're adolescents. That's too late. We have to be talking to them all along the way, and we can use our modern culture as things to talk about. Like if we're watching a movie on TV and we see negative gender roles about men and women, we can say to our kids, on TV, all the men seem really stupid.
Yeah.
Right? We can say that's not true. So we can always be looking for ways to teach them. And, of course, it isn't just sex. It's about really relationships and how to have good relationships with everybody. So that's one of the things we can do all the time.
So it's really pretty much starting in the cradle, and as things come up, just guiding them the best we can without throwing in all our negative beliefs that we grew up with, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and sometimes it means you have to take a kind of a big breath and kind of go, okay, all right, I'm going to be brave here, and I'm going to, say something to my kid that my parents would never have said to me, and that takes some courage sometimes, even for those of us who are well educated. When our children ask us the questions, and they will ask if we're the kind of parents who've proven they can ask us, and they'll ask us those questions like, where do babies come from, and there we have the opportunity to give them a piece of information and then check in. Like we don't have to download everything we know about how babies are made, but we can give them a piece of information and then say, did that answer your question? And then they'll say yes sometimes, and maybe it'll be a year or two before they get to the next question, or they'll say, well, but no, but how does daddy's sperm get to mommy's egg? And then we get to go to that next level. So, we just, if we're brave enough to just tell them the truth without that charge, then they'll just go, oh, okay, and then they'll go run and play some more. So we do have the opportunity, and I think we can help each other, talk to our friends about how they're dealing with it with their children, and we can support each other in that also,
Sure.
with suggestions and help. So we can co-create a more positive world for our children, where instead of being ashamed of their sexuality, they feel empowered about it, because that's when they're going to make the best choices, which is really what we want. We want them to make good, healthy, responsible choices about what they do with themselves and who they do it with and when.
Right. How about sex addiction? You mentioned porno. Is that a real disease?
Well, I don't think it's a very useful model for sex for a number of reasons, because I think our sexuality is such a part of ourselves, whereas if you're addicted to alcohol, you don't need to drink alcohol ever in your whole life, but you're always going to be a sexual being. So I think it's more useful to look at if we're behaving in ways that hurt ourselves or hurt other people with anything in our lives, but particularly with our sexuality, then we want to learn how to get more to be in choice about what we do and who we do it with. So I think there are people who behave very compulsively around their sexuality, but I'm a little leery of the word addiction here.
Right. So it's really behavior, right?
Yeah, and it's sort of like some people can have a glass of wine and be fine. Some people that they just can't. And I think it's the same with any kind of erotica or anything that stimulates them, that there are some people who can have a healthy relationship with porn and other forms of erotica, and there are some people who get into compulsive behavior patterns with that, or with their direct sexual behavior with other people. But I don't think it's the sex that's the problem. I think there's something underneath that that's driving that, and that's what people need to look at and get help with.
Yeah, okay. This question here, I've been waiting to ask you. What are the 3 parts of a woman's body even their gynecologist don't know about?
Oh, and let me tell you, this is really kind of the heart of my book, or really we could call it the crotch of the book, I suppose. But it's really about understanding female genital anatomy. And the fact is that women, we have parts that most of us don't know about, and our medical providers don't know about them either. And I will give a little side note, which is that I went to school for lots of years to get all those degrees, and I didn't learn this stuff in the many times I studied anatomy. So it's not in our mainstream model. It's not in our textbooks. So women have a whole network of structures responsible for arousal and orgasm. And the clitoris is you could think of it as the tip of the volcano. But there's a whole network of structures, and because we don't know about them, our care providers don't know about them, we don't understand either how to play with them and make them happy, or also the health implications of these parts. So let me throw out a few. We've got structures called vestibular bulbs, which are like parentheses, and they are surround the opening of the vagina, and they connect up to the clitoris, which actually the clitoris has 3 parts. And this forms a whole network, so that when women get aroused, this whole network swells, just like the male equipment does. In fact, we have just as much of that engorgeable tissue as men do. But if we don't utilize that whole network, we are not going to get all of the pleasure that we could get from various activities. It's kind of like playing the piano, but you think there's 22 keys on the piano. And suddenly I'm here going, nope, there's 88 keys and there's foot pedals. And suddenly when you're like, oh, there's the whole rest of the instrument. And then when you play with the whole instrument, arousal gets easier. It gets easier to have orgasms. It gets easier to have pleasurable sexual, lots of different activities become more pleasurable. We also have some of that engorgeable erectile tissue inside. So what is now being called the G-spot, which isn't actually a spot, it's a tube of erectile tissue, is above the roof of the vagina. We also have erectile tissue in the floor of the vagina. So we've got this whole network that most of us don't even know we have, so we're not playing with it and we're not having a good time.